I had a good chuckle at a bad take I saw on Twitter today. Some weirdo came out and tried to say that, like, I played Star Wars Rogue Squadron before Star Fox 64 came out, and I was shocked at just how much better Star Wars was. First of all, that's not true. Like, Star Wars Rogue Squadron is nowhere near the level of quality of Star Fox 64. But secondly, Rogue Squadron came out after Star Fox anyway. So, like, the entire, like, basis of the argument that, like, Rogue Squadron was more technically demanding and, like, realistic and better than Star Fox, like, it came out a year after. Like, what are you talking about? Again, it's very, very interesting seeing people, like, try and come out and criticize Star Fox as a brand, because so much of it, like, hinges on, like, weird ideas like this idea that, like, somehow, like, rail shooters are inferior to, like, open world games or more open environment games, and, like, that just isn't the case. Like, Star Fox's mission structure is just so much better. They have, actual boss fights. It has, like, the route system. Like, yeah, Rogue Squadron's great. I love Rogue Squadron. But, like, it's a little bit difficult for a kid to get into. I really, really struggled playing through it as a kid. So, like, in a lot of ways, Star Fox 64 manages to, like, be a lot more balanced, where, like, it incentivizes replay value, it has multiplayer, like, it has its own appeal. Like, they're different games, right? Like, the idea that, like, Rogue Squadron, like, clears Star Fox just because it has, like, open environments is, like, retarded. That's like saying that, like, Grand Theft Auto is better than, like, New Super Mario Bros. Because, like, well, it's, like, open world, bro. Like, no, like, that isn't, like, a basis. That's not a metric to, like, judge a video game. Okay? It's something that, like, we do have to address and we have to bring up, and it's something that we have to, like, call into question, right? Like, we have to address the fact that, like, a lot of these people are desperate to downplay, like, every major Nintendo brand. The fact that Star Fox has been such a huge hit and such a huge success, like, it's scary, I think, to the gaming establishment, because Star Fox was, like, the downplayed Nintendo brand for the past 30 years. Like, in a lot of ways, I think the gaming journalism industry believed that, like, all Nintendo IPs would eventually be like Star Fox, where they would be derelict, they would be outdated, they wouldn't be able to, like, stay up to date with the times, that the industry would move past them. Like, even if Nintendo put out, like, all-time classics like 64, like, eventually gamers would move on to bigger and better things. And, like, for a long time, like, Star Fox was, like, the poster child of that. A franchise that people genuinely thought would never, ever, ever see a comeback. And now, like, the comeback is here. The game is a huge hit. Like, everybody loves it. And, like, the entire cope, like, completely falls apart. Like, when the game is still beloved by new players, like, 30 years later, like, the entire argument that the game was, like, outdated and wasn't competitive and wasn't relevant, like, it just kind of falls apart. Like, so many people made the argument that, like, Star Fox Assault, like, was the future of Star Fox, just because Fox gets out of the cockpit and there are, like, these open areas that are just kind of boring, and, like, it's that was, like, the mindset at the time. The fact that, like, we've moved past that and people are actually addressing, like, the reality that Star Fox as a franchise is something that's still very relevant today. It demonstrates, like, how strong Nintendo's branding actually is, and how a game like this can still remain relevant, like, 30 years later. And we're gonna see, like, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, go toe to toe with Grand Theft Auto 6, right? And the fact that, like, Grand Theft Auto 6 is gonna compete against a 30-year-old game, that is, like, a sign of what's to come, right? Like, the entire notion that, like, people, Nintendo games just kind of come and go, like, that's been disproven by this release. Like, the simple fact of the matter is Breath of the Wild is still relevant a decade later. Mario Odyssey is still relevant. Star Fox is relevant 30 years later. Ocarina of Time is still relevant. Like, we're seeing, like, evidence that the N64 has had way more staying power and relevancy than the PS1. Like, this is the big, like, issue that people just can't bring themselves to face, is that the N64 absolutely demolished the PS1 in the console war. And the reason for that is Nintendo put out higher quality games that sold more and stayed relevant longer. While, like, Sony was, like, entirely reliant on fads, selling things at low prices, and just gaslighting people into thinking their games were way better than, like, the competition, right? Like, if you actually play Nintendo games, you realize very, very quickly just how much better than they are in the competition. Anybody who spent any amount of time with Star Fox 64 would tell you that it's better than anything Star Wars has ever done. I would argue that, like, Star Fox 64, like, clears everything that, like, um, all the Star Wars movies combined. You know, it has a better story, it has better characters, it has, like, better banter, it has, like, better space battles, you know. Like, it's kind of shocking, you know, looking at Star Wars, seeing how little how little time they actually spend, you know, in the ships, you know, actually fighting wars, you know what I mean? Like, Fox McCloud is just, like, so much better. Like, the R-Wings are so much more hardcore. They do so much more, like, you know, they could have taken out the Death Star without the plans. Okay, like, it's just so far beyond anything Star Wars has ever done. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, considering this game's 30 years old now, like, I think in a lot of ways, Star Fox has outlasted Star Wars as a brand. You know, Star Wars is something that people are nostalgic for because, like, in a lot of cases, it's like the first fantasy movie they saw growing up and they're nostalgic towards it. And they've spent decades making excuses for the prequels and saying that they're good or whatever. And then in reality, you look at, like, what, you know, Star Fox has done over the past 30 years, and you get higher quality content. Like, something like Star Fox Zero, it was better than The Last Jedi. You know, it was better than anything Star Wars has done since, like, the 70s. Okay, like, Star Fox is just, it's a brand that clearly showcases just how much farther ahead Nintendo is than LucasArts. Okay, what Rogue Squadron game have you played lately? Okay, like, the original Rogue Squadron was great, but 2 and 3 were complete garbage, especially 3, and, like, we haven't gotten anything since. And meanwhile, Star Fox is still a relevant brand that's excelling by doing what it's always done, and that's something that I think a lot of people are very skeptical of. A lot of people just aren't willing to acknowledge that, like, Star Fox is better than Star Wars because it's just a nostalgia thing. Like, people just aren't willing to admit that their childhood favorite things that they've grown up with have been outclassed by a superior Japanese product. Like, that's really all it is. Like, and it's been like that for years. You know, you still see people trying to glaze, like, the original Last of Us and, like, you know, the original God of Wars. Games like Astrobot for the same reasons, right? Like, they desperately want to protect, like, the non-Nintendo thing. You know, like, you're seeing a lot of people glaze Toy Story 5 right now. And, like, that movie is not as good as Mario Galaxy. It's not as successful. You know, it's not as popular, right? But, like, because, like, these millennials, like, grew up with Toy Story, it's, like, their thing, okay? Like, it doesn't matter how bad the movies get. Like, they'll keep defending their thing. And I feel as if that's something that we really do have to address and point out. Like, how this is negatively affecting the culture. Because people treated, like, Star Fox's failure as if it was, like, a foregone conclusion. You know, like, even in, like, the early 2000s, they were trying to tell us that, like, the game was too short and that, like, this style of play was outdated and it wasn't going to be successful in the future, and yet, like, it just wasn't true. And the sooner people accept that, the sooner it'll be generally accepted that, like, Nintendo's method of game dev is far superior to the competition, because you get games like this. You get games like Star Fox. You get games like Rhythm Heaven. You get games like, you know, Splatoon Raiders, which are not at all like other games that get released. Like, Overwatch, like Blizzard announced that like we were going to be getting like single player campaigns with all the heroes like day one back in 2016. Never happened. Meanwhile, like Splatoon has had single player campaigns since the beginning, have been slowly improving, and now they're putting out their own single player experience, right? Which is radically unlike like the multiplayer mode and really feels innovative and wildly different and exciting. It's something I think that like the community just can't accept. Like that's kind of the problem that we're seeing here. That's kind of the issue that like we've been having with these people is that like they see like the AAA industry, like the open world, a realistically rendered PlayStation exclusive, like they see that as the peak of gaming. And anything that deviates from that is something that's like not being designed for the mass market and just isn't relevant as a result of that. And they're just kind of, they don't really appreciate creativity. They don't appreciate variety. They don't understand like how video games actually work. They are essentially glazing the very processes that allowed the gaming industry to collapse the way it did. Like the demonization of Star Fox in a lot of ways is kind of indicative of just how the industry was already failing by the 2000s. The fact that so many people acted like this was some like major fail on Nintendo's part, that like this was a franchise that was never going to come back, like that wasn't true. That was never going to be true. That was always ridiculous. And yet like we were really led to believe this for the past several years. And it is high time that we throw this ideology out the window.